Hello, this is Ronnie McBrayer. Thank you for finding my podcast. If you are burned out on religion, to quote Eugene Peterson's marvelous paraphrase, but faith is still important to you, or if you consider yourself a spiritual exile with no real place of belief to call home, then I have you especially in mind. I hope you'll stick around. Thanks again for listening.
Hey, I was really surprised last week, right as service got started, when all of my devices started warning me that our community had been placed under a tropical storm watch. Phone was pinging in my pocket. My watch was vibrating on my wrist. The tablet was lighting up over on the music stand. And I generally pay close attention to the weather most of the time. I have all these years living near the beach, but somehow the fact that there was a storm brewing in the Gulf last week eluded me. So I'll be honest, I had a hard time believing it was true. I thought I was being spammed. But no, it was true. And just as true, the spamming came later. I don't know if this was your experience this week, but over the next 3 days, I got 23 tropical storm alerts and updates. The Weather Channel, the Sheriff's Department, the National Hurricane Center, they were all pinging my phone constantly for a storm that for the most part was a non-event. This repetitive alarm scheme has a name in the 21st century. It is called alert fatigue. In the age of the smartphone and uber connectedness, with all of us getting more notifications, zings, dings, and pings than we know what to do with, the overabundance of alerts simply is not helpful. Dr. Evan Kirkwood. Emergency notifications are a vital tool for public safety, providing real-time alerts about threats such as severe weather, wildfires, and public health emergencies. However, when people receive too many alerts, especially ones that feel irrelevant, they may experience alert fatigue. When individuals are bombarded with excessive or unnecessary notifications causing frustration, they ultimately stop the alerts altogether. And unfortunately, this means they may miss critical warnings when they matter the most. But we've known about alert fatigue for at least the last 2,500 years. At least since Aesop told his story of the boy who cried wolf. You remember that story, right? A mischievous shepherd boy is bored just sitting around watching the sheep. What's the fun in that? He concocts this idea to infuse a bit of excitement into his day. Wolf, wolf, a wolf is after the sheep, and all the villagers come running out with torches and pitchforks to save the sheep, but there is no wolf. And the boy laughs, and he laughs at the good town folk, and man, are they mad. And this happens on and on. The boy gets a raz out of it every time, and the villagers go away angry. Well, finally, a wolf does attack the sheep herd, and the boy cries out, "Wolf, wolf, a wolf is attacking the sheep," but no one comes to his rescue. The herd is completely lost, and in some tellings of the story, the boy is even eaten by the wolf. And Aesop concludes, nobody believes a liar, even when they're telling the truth. Well, I'm not going to lie to you today, and I'm not going to cry wolf. There is no danger of alert fatigue, and this is not a false alarm. A storm is coming. You can count on it. It's as sure as the rising and the setting sun. And how I wish the coming storm was just thunderbolts and lightning, very, very frightening. Just a little wind and a little rain, but the storm I'm talking about is much more severe than that. I'm talking about those personal, sometimes very private storms. Storms of the heart, the emotions, emotional, spiritual typhoons. They are coming for you. A divorce you never dreamed possible, unfaithfulness by a spouse you could not have imagined, betrayal by a business partner or your closest friend, the loss of your job, the loss of your soulmate, the loss of a child, a devastating health diagnosis you never saw coming, a wayward son, a wayward daughter, addiction, a mental health crisis. And I'm not a pessimist. Far from that. I'm not trying to make you feel bad or annoy you with an alarm. And I'm certainly not saying all of this to make you afraid, to live coiled up, waiting for the next shoe to drop. Living afraid is no way to live at all. I'm just an early alert system. Storms are bound to come. Now, most of them will blow over in a day or two, and we are no more worse off for the wear. But some storms, like I've just invoked, and many more just like them, these storms are devastating. They're life-altering, faith-testing, soul-crushing disasters. They break us. They lash and torment us in ways that the outside weather never could. Where do you turn in the midst of one of these storms? How do you survive the darkest thundering days and the endless sleeping nights? What do you do in a storm? This morning I want to take a few signals from the Apostle Paul in that stormy shipwreck that he suffered in Acts 27 and glean from it a blueprint for survival. And survival is the key word. Getting through it, hanging in there, holding on, just grinding away until the rain stops. I don't want to give this talk as a how-to list or to say that your worst troubles are an easy equation to solve, that if you'll just do A, B, C, then X, Y, Z will be the lickety-split outcome. The Bible really doesn't work like that, and if you've lived long enough, you know that life really doesn't work like that either. But there is, I think, a pattern here in Paul's experience in the worst storm he had ever seen, and we can see in this pattern, I think, some survival lessons for ourselves when we are being lashed by the wind and the wave. What do you do in a storm? The Apostle Paul, as I said earlier, is on his way to Rome. He's making a crossing of the Mediterranean Sea across a transport ship with nearly 300 other passengers. These passengers are not enjoying a carnival cruise. They are political prisoners on their way to trial. For Paul's part, he has been charged with insurrection. Early Christians refused to call Caesar Lord, as emperor worship was just about a requirement in the first century. No, that title, Christians said, belonged exclusively to Jesus. Jesus was Lord. And so all of our allegiances and loyalties are involved in that declaration. And for this, the earliest Jesus followers were charged with troublemaking, with rebellion, and then in the strangest irony, they were charged as atheists because they didn't believe that the emperor was God. Their crime was not they believed in going to heaven after they died. It was not because they believed in Jesus and they believed that Jesus died for their sins and was later resurrected. They were arrested and tried not because of theology, but because they would not bow their knee to the empire. And so to trial and to persecution and to prison and often execution they went. Paul, both as a Christian and a Roman citizen, a privilege that not everyone enjoyed, was on his way to Rome to answer these charges. And on the way, this storm hits. Day and night, it rains, the wind blows, the seas roar, the ship's hull cracks and groans, and ultimately it runs aground, splintering into a million pieces, and yet everyone survives. How did this happen? What did they do? What should you do? Number one, in a storm, you got to get rid of everything you don't need. To the text, Bobby, the slide one, if you would. As gale force winds continued to batter the ship, the crew began throwing the cargo overboard. The following day, they even took some of the ship's gear and threw it overboard. I'm not much of a sailor, but as I understand it, in heavy surf, in a bad storm, you want that boat to be as light as possible. Because in a storm, you have to ride across the top of the waves rather than being risked to be swamped and swallowed by those waves. So in a storm, you get rid of everything you don't need. What was so important, so critical that you had to hang on to it for your entire life, when the crisis hits, suddenly what you thought was valuable becomes a liability. Paul's shipmates throw off the cargo. Thousands and thousands, millions maybe in today's money, dollars worth of valuables. The near priceless shipment of wheat that would feed the masses of Rome. And then they do the unthinkable. They throw the tackle overboard. The ropes, the pulleys, the supplies. You really couldn't sail without these things, but it was all worthless if it was so heavy it was going to take you to the bottom of the sea. Now was the time to travel as light as possible. To do or act otherwise was suicidal. And storms have a way of doing this, of realigning our priorities, do they not? If your financial world collapses, you concentrate on feeding your kids and trying your best to keep a roof over their head. You suddenly stop worrying about your precious credit score. You stop worrying about all of those other things. If your husband comes home one day and says, "I'm leaving, I found someone new," you don't suddenly think about your responsibilities as the president of the PTA. That sort of falls off the priority list. If your doctor calls you and says, "There's an abnormality in your blood work and I need to see you right away," well, whatever it was you were planning or thinking, or that big project at work that was so eternally important, that sort of disappears, does it not? Are you picking up what I'm laying down? You move from business as usual to survival mode. And that means some things, even some very important things, some very valuable things, have to get chunked overboard. I like to think of it in terms of an evacuation. A hurricane evacuation, maybe. I know I shouldn't be saying that. And if you're listening online today, this might not hit you the same, but you will understand. For those of us who live along the Gulf Coast, we know what it's like to have to evacuate in the face of a coming storm. What do you put in your car when you evacuate? Your kids? Your pets? A few changes of clothes? If your computer's mobile, you might get it if it's portable. A few cherished pictures, your insurance papers, and that's about it. Your attitude, whether you acknowledge it or not, is something like this: I'm taking the things with me that I cannot live without. If I return and there's nothing left, it will be okay. We will survive because I have only what is most important to me. You will never see, I hope not, maybe you will. Rarely will you ever see someone's refrigerator tied to the top of their car as they evacuate on a hurricane. You don't see many John Deere tractors in tow on Interstate 10 as people are trying to get out of the way. You never see a flat panel television as a high priority in an evacuation. These things are expensive. These things are valuable. In a modern world, you really can't live without them. But when the storm's bearing down on you, they got to go. Because we only have so much room to take what's really important. In September of 1857, a ship called the Central America was steaming up the East Coast, headed for New York City. The ship had left the country of Panama just days earlier. It was nicknamed in Spanish Barco de Oro, the ship of gold. It was carrying 18,000 pounds of gold taken from the California gold rush. In today's dollars, $2.5 billion on this one boat. And it was accompanied by all the miners and the investors and the prospectors who were now some of the wealthiest people in the United States. But a ship that heavy is no match for a hurricane. Even a small hurricane that struck it just off the coast of Cape Hatteras, North Carolina. The ship began to sink, and passengers scrambling for the lifeboats had gold bars stuffed into their pockets. gold coins stuck in their shoes, their purses held between their teeth. And each passenger, when they arrived at the lifeboat, the captain and his crew was waiting for them. And at gunpoint, they had to decide, get in the lifeboat with just yourself and the clothes on your back, or stay on the boat with your gold. Some chose to live. They got in that lifeboat with only the clothes on their back, and these people, every one of them, returned home safely, poor and broke. All their work squandered and their treasure abandoned, but they were alive. Others chose the gold. They chose to stay with the ship and their fortune, thinking that they could survive. And everyone who stayed with that boat and the treasure found their way to the bottom of the sea, where that gold rests to this very day. This is a good homework assignment for you, especially if you find yourself in a storm today, or any day for that matter. Go home and make a list. Let this be your guiding question. What am I holding on to right now that is only sinking my ship? What must I let go of to keep my nose above the water? Do I need to have a yard sale? Do I need to drop some obligations? Do I need to set better boundaries? Where can I conserve my energy? Because when you are in a crisis, whether it be in a close relationship, legal trouble, in regard to your health, as you grieve some massive loss, when you're in a crisis, your time, effort, focus, attention, and spirit can only be given to a few vital things. You don't have the bandwidth or the capacity to operate otherwise. All the rest has to go. So make that list, determine all that is weighing you down, and then have the courage to throw it overboard. Because it is taking your life, not giving you life. And number 2, back to the text, slide 2 if you would. Get rid of everything you don't need. And number 2, set your anchors deep. The terrible storm raged for many days, blotting out the sun and the stars until at last all hope was gone. About midnight on the 14th night, can you imagine? 14th night of the storm, the sailors sensed land was near. What did they do? They threw out 4 anchors from the back of the ship and prayed for daylight. Boy, I've been there, haven't you? Praying for daylight, that if the sun could just come up one more time, things might get better. If we can get through this one dark, hopeless night, praying for daylight while anchored deep. I don't have to tell you to pray hard when the storm comes. It's pretty instinctive. When the wind blows hard enough, most atheism gets blown away with it. Tim was telling me the other day about he watches, his wife Kim's been out of town, so I know this is all he's been watching, some storm chaser program. He loves the storm chasing stuff. And I do too, really. And he was telling about this program about these young men who are just these foul-mouthed, filthy little animals. And they're brash and they're swashbuckling and they're brave as they go across the Great Plains looking for a tornado. And they're like that while they're chasing the tornado until they actually catch one. And then the tornado has caught them. And then these brash, foul-mouthed young men start saying, "Oh, Lord, baby Jesus in the manger, please come save us right now. I'm sorry for my language. Oh, Lord, I should not have treated my mama that way." Well, that's sort of what happens when you get in trouble, amen? We all start praying for a little help, and that's good. But the other part of this here is that anchoring deep. What is an anchor? It's that fixed point that you can count on. It's that thing that gives you strength and stability. It's that point that you hold on to at all costs, because if you know if you let it go, you're going to get washed away. And I think this dovetails perfectly with getting rid of what we don't need. Yes, when the storm hits, lighten the load, get rid of anything extra, but don't cut every cord. There are some things so crucial, so essential, that if you let go of them in the storm, you'll be lost. That is an anchor. And when you stop and look at your life, 3 or 4 anchors is all we really have. And it's all we really need to stay grounded. If we lost these anchors, we would be lost. But knowing that they're there, the wind can blow, the rain can fall, and we can hang on in spite of it. Let's make that part 2 of your homework assignment. What keeps you settled in the storm? What do you hold on to when the wind starts blowing, knowing if I let this go, I'll be a goner? What are your anchors? Family? A circle of your closest friends? A mantra of some kind of moral principle, your belief in finding meaning? Often your true and strongest anchors in life are discovered by asking this question: why do I do what I do? Friedrich Nietzsche, the German philosopher, existentialist, provocateur who has never enjoyed a good relationship with the church, said this: he who has a why to live can bear almost any how. That's worth thinking about. The why is the anchor. And the why always comes down to a few things. Those that I love, the work that I do, the faith that I have to hold on to, or rather, the faith that is holding on to me. I read Nietzsche in spite of his reputation and his fantastic fatalistic pessimism. But I'm more prone to think about my grandmother. I've been thinking a lot about my grandmother lately. The Rusty Goat's preparing to launch a giving garden, a farm this year, God willing. When it comes to farming, it is always God willing. My grandmother Bearden, was a farmer. And she was my hero. She didn't look like a hero. She owned very little. When they liquidated her estate in 2001, when she died, she had less than $500 to her name. But she had something worth a whole lot more than that. Resolve. Peace. The kind of strength that is the product of facing a lot of storms. Her mother and her grandmother died when she was barely weaned, killed in the Spanish flu epidemic. Poverty, 2 world wars, the Great Depression. Her stepmother was committed to a mental institution. She gave birth to 8 children. Only one, my mother, was born in a hospital. She had miscarriages. She buried a child. And through it all, she was married to a man who was a storm unto himself. Floyd Bearden was plagued by the demons of depression and addiction and alcoholism, given to violence and abuse. She was victimized by him and his ways for decades. But for a Southern woman living in the middle of the 20th century with 7 children on a cotton farm, escaping such a man was impossible. It was a prison. She refused to speak ill of him my entire life, only saying once to me that the quote, the best years of my life was after that man was dead. So I asked her one time, how did she do that? You know, it was an interview for a college project. Our professor said, go find somebody that lived through the Depression. You could still find a lot of folks then. Go find someone who lived through World War II and interview them. My grandmother was the obvious choice. And for really the first time, I knew all these things I just told you, but face-to-face in a recorded interview, an interview that I still have on cassette tape. Y'all know what those are, cassette tapes? You know, take a little pencil and back it up. I just let her talk, and she did talk for hours. And at the end of it, I just said, how do you do that? I mean, we think we got trouble. We think our lives are afflicted. Come on. How did you do that? The most powerful line, the best theology I've ever heard in my life to this day. And I got all those little letters behind my name that show you that I'm a bookworm. She said, son, I did what I could, and God Almighty took care of the rest. And that is the best theology you will ever hear in your life. All you can do is what you can do. And you can't do any more than that. And trust God, the anchor, to hold in the storm.